The hospital lobby smelled like antiseptic and quiet tension. A Navy veteran stood near the reception desk, holding a scuffed briefcase with both hands. Calm, still, unnoticed. Until the young doctor raised his voice and pointed at him. "You can't just stand there. This isn't a waiting room for ghosts." The veteran said nothing. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just lowered his eyes and adjusted the strap on the briefcase. The staff paused. A few heads turned. The doctor stepped closer, now practically yelling. And then, from behind him, came a firm, commanding voice. "Commander Wallace, I've been looking for you." The doctor turned, confused. A 4-star general was standing behind him, not to scold the vet, but to salute him. The hospital smelled of sterilized floors and cold judgment. A Navy veteran, in his 60s, walked in slow, each step heavy but deliberate. He wore a well-pressed blazer, boots worn at the heel, and a briefcase held tight like it carried everything he had left in the world. He stood in line without speaking, eyes tracing the tiled floor, head slightly bowed. The nurse at the desk didn't look up, too busy typing and glancing at her screen. The veteran waited anyway, not the impatient kind, just standing firm as if trained to respect cues no matter what. A young doctor in a white coat appeared from a hallway, fast-walking like he owned the place. He glanced once at the veteran and rolled his eyes. "Sir, this area is restricted," he said, not even slowing down. "You can't be standing here." The veteran turned slightly, adjusted his stance, and gave a small, respectful nod. The doctor paused, frustrated. "Did you hear me? This isn't the waiting area. If you need something, go back to the front. This is not a public hangout." His voice carried across the lobby. The staff at the counter exchanged awkward glances but said nothing. The veteran didn't protest. He only placed the briefcase at his feet and stood straighter, chin lifted slightly, eyes ahead. He looked, not offended, but tired, like he'd seen 1,000 such moments before. Another man entered, janitor by the looks of his uniform, and gave the veteran a slow nod. "Good to see you back, Commander," he whispered while passing by. The doctor didn't hear it, but the veteran did. He gave a small blink of thanks and turned back toward the desk. The doctor scoffed and walked closer, irritation building. "You think silence gives you permission to ignore rules?" he barked. "You people just loiter here for hours. You need an appointment like everyone else." The room went a little quiet. One security guard looked up, then back down. The veteran didn't move, didn't defend himself, just bent down calmly and dusted off the corner of his briefcase. A small metal insignia glinted in the artificial light, a Navy badge, faded but unmistakable. The doctor didn't notice, or didn't care. "Security?" The doctor yelled across the room. "Please escort this gentleman outside. He refuses to comply with hospital policy." The receptionist blinked, finally registering the name on the intake form that had just loaded. She opened her mouth to speak, then stopped as someone else entered behind her. Heavy boots struck the lobby floor. A man in crisp green uniform, broad-shouldered, taller than the doctor, stepped into view. He wore full military dress, rows of ribbons, and 4 stars glinting proudly on his chest. His face was stone. His presence, absolute. The doctor turned confused. Behind him stood a tall man in full military dress, 4 stars on his chest. No one needed introductions. This was a general, and everyone suddenly knew it. He looked past the doctor like he didn't exist. His eyes locked onto the veteran. His lips tightened, jaw set. He marched forward, each step deliberate, passing the front desk without a word. Then came the command. "Commander Wallace, I've been looking for you." The entire room held its breath. The doctor turned pale. The security guard took one instinctive step back. The janitor paused with the mop. The veteran stood still, not shocked, just quietly respectful. He lifted his chin and gave the faintest nod. "Sir," he said, steady, reporting present. The general, not casually, but with full military honor. The slap of the hand to forehead echoed in the sterile air, and then the veteran returned the salute. A perfect, crisp motion. A man not broken, only waiting for someone to remember who he was. The general stepped closer, lowering his hand slowly. "I've been trying to reach you for weeks," he said. "We have a seat waiting at the Arlington dedication. Thought you'd want to be there with the rest of us." The doctor opened his mouth but couldn't speak. "Who is this man?" he finally asked. The general turned his head sharply. "This man," he said coldly, "is the reason men like you can shout orders and clean buildings?" The receptionist covered her mouth. The janitor stood still. Even the air conditioning seemed to quiet down. The doctor stammered. "I didn't know," but the general didn't let him finish. "You didn't ask?" he said simply. "That's the problem with too many men in white coats. You look, but you don't see." He turned back to the veteran. "Your ride is waiting, Commander." The veteran bent down, lifted his briefcase, and straightened slowly. He gave a polite nod to the counter. "I won't need that appointment after all." The nurse nodded back, eyes wide. The doctor stepped aside, sheepishly, as the 2 men walked past. They didn't speak until they reached the doors. The general pushed it open and held it, like a soldier holding a line. The veteran stepped through, then paused. "Sir?" he said softly. "Thank you for remembering." The general nodded once. "We never forget our own." As the doors closed behind them, silence returned. The doctor stood alone, eyes stuck on the navy patch he never saw. The janitor finally moved, shaking his head. Some uniforms don't shine anymore, he muttered, but they still outrank the rest. Outside, the veteran climbed into a waiting black SUV, tinted windows, silent driver, government plates, the doors shut with quiet finality. The vehicle rolled away. Inside, the general handed him a folded paper, his seat placement at the memorial, front row and back inside the hospital. No one ever spoke to a patient like that again. The SUV rolled through the city like a silent procession, its windows tinted dark against the afternoon sun. Inside, the Navy veteran sat beside the general, briefcase still in his lap. His fingers tapped once, lightly, against the worn leather handle, but otherwise, he said nothing. The general glanced his way, then back at the road ahead. "You haven't changed?" he said, voice steady. "Same coat, same posture." The veteran smiled faintly, eyes still forward. "Didn't think I'd need to," he replied. "Turns out I was wrong." They passed street signs and construction zones, each moment stretching longer than the last. "You were hard to find," the general added. "We had men looking across 3 states. Figured you didn't want to be found." The veteran nodded once. "Some of us go quiet for good reason." Traffic slowed as they approached the government district. The veteran glanced out the window. "Funny," he said. "Used to come through here in uniform. Now, I pass unnoticed." The general gripped the steering wheel tighter. "You're not unnoticed. You're just Big difference." They parked behind a marble building draped in flags. The memorial office. Quiet, guarded, empty of crowds. The general stepped out first, holding the door like a soldier, not an officer. The veteran followed without hesitation, boots clicking faintly on the pavement. A guard at the front saluted them both, recognizing the stars, and then the man beside him. No words exchanged, just respect, the kind you don't need a name tag for. Inside, the halls echoed with history, photos, ribbons, medals, underglass. The veteran paused in front of one case, eyes scanning the rows of dog tags behind the glass. "Some of those belong to boys I trained," he murmured. The general didn't interrupt, just stood quietly beside him, and some were trained by those boys. A clerk stepped out, clipboard in hand, eyes wide as he recognized the veteran. He stammered slightly, unsure if to salute or shake hands. The general answered for him. "Just show him his seat placement. That'll be enough." The clerk nodded quickly and disappeared. "Do you remember Sergeant Mackenzie?" the general asked. The veteran gave a soft chuckle. "Big guy. Broke his wrist punching through a wall in Fallujah. Said drywall was softer than discipline." The general smiled. "He's one of the speakers this year. He asked about you." The veteran's smile faded slowly. "I don't talk much anymore," he said. "Some memories sound better when left inside." The general didn't push, just nodded. "That's why we put your name in silence. On the front row, just your name. That'll speak enough." The clerk returned with a sealed envelope. The veteran opened it slowly, pulling out a white card. It read, "Commander Wallace, Section A, Row 1. Below that, one word. Nothing else? No photo? No military branch. Just his name and a chair." He held the card for a long moment, then placed it carefully into the inner pocket of his coat. "I never asked for this," he said. The general replied calmly, "You never had to. That's the point." Back outside, they stood beneath the flagpole. The wind caught the stars and stripes, snapping it high overhead. The veteran looked up. "I remember when that flag was folded for me once," he said. "But I wasn't in the casket. I was just standing nearby." The general stared ahead. "A lot of us watched others get folded in," he said. "The ones left standing never really stood the same after." They didn't speak for a while, just watched the wind move through symbols, both remembering a different silence. The drive back took a different route, through older neighborhoods now faded from memory. The veteran pointed once. "Used to be a diner there. We'd go after drills. Place smelled like gun oil and waffles." The general chuckled. "That's a lethal combination." They pulled into a residential block where brick houses lined each side. The SUV idled in front of a single-story home with a flag planted straight in the yard. No flowers, no porch lights, just a mailbox that still read Wallace in block letters. "This where you've been?" the general asked. The veteran nodded. "Bought it with savings from my last tour. Quiet. Neighbors don't ask questions. The kind of place you only find when you stop looking." The general respected that. "Mind if I come in?" The veteran opened the door with a small key from his front pocket. Inside, the house was clean but spare. No decorations, no distractions, just a couch, a shelf with medals still boxed, and a table with a single cup turned upside down. The general walked to the shelf. "You never displayed these?" The veteran shrugged. "They're not decorations. They're receipts, things I paid for, and I'm done paying." The general didn't argue, just placed one back gently and turned toward the chair. On the wall, a single photo hung crooked, a younger Wallace, in uniform, shaking hands with a president long out of office. They took that for a headline. The veteran muttered, "Not for memory." The general nodded slowly. "That's why we're here. To fix that." A knock came at the door. Strange timing. The veteran opened it to find a man in courier uniform, holding a wrapped package. No words, just a delivery, signed and handed over. Wallace unwrapped it carefully, revealing a folded flag in a display case. Inside the case was a handwritten note, for Commander Wallace, not for what you gave, but for what you carried after. No signature, just a seal. The general stared at the message. That came from upstairs, he said, way upstairs. The veteran didn't smile, but his jaw tightened. I didn't think anyone remembered. The general gave a short nod. They didn't. I did, and I made sure they never forgot again. Wallace set the case on the shelf, not next to the medals, but above them. They sat for a few minutes, neither speaking, just two soldiers sharing a silence louder than words. The general stood finally. Tomorrow's the ceremony. Wallace nodded. I'll be there, quietly, like always. As the general left, he stopped at the door. One more thing, he said. That doctor, the one from earlier, he'll be working reception at the ceremony. Let's just say, rotation duty got reassigned. The veteran cracked a smile. Good, maybe he'll learn to listen. The door closed softly behind him. The house returned to stillness. Wallace walked to the chair, sat down, and opened his briefcase. Inside was a single photograph, his unit, standing proud in desert fatigues, every face accounted for. He stared at it for a long time, then folded it back in. Tomorrow was coming, and this time, someone would say his name, not as an insult, but as a salute. The Scout's hands moved over the controls with a steady confidence, born from years of grit and grit alone. He didn't rush. Each command was deliberate, a dance of precision and patience. The general stood nearby, watching silently, his weathered face unreadable but his eyes shining with pride and a touch of something deeper. The test range was cleared. Engineers, commanders, and soldiers held their breath. The tank rumbled forward, treads gripping earth with renewed hunger. The engines roared to life, raw and imperfect, but fierce. This was no polished machine for parades. This was a warrior reborn to prove its worth under fire. Jack spun the turret with practiced ease, lining up on the first target. The shell launched, tearing through the air like a spear. Impact was clean and precise, a perfect strike. Cheers tried to rise, but were swallowed by respect. This wasn't about showmanship. This was about honor, and Jack knew it well. The general's voice broke the silence. Live fire, maneuver test. Proceed. The tank moved across the course, turning, reversing, navigating debris with surprising agility. Jack's hands didn't falter. The machine responded like a loyal companion. Steel and man connected by invisible threads of trust and history. A sudden blast simulation rocked the range. Jack braced. The tank shuddered, but held firm. Sensors monitored hull integrity, suspension, strength, and engine stress. Every reading came back with intolerance. The tank was no longer fragile. It was forged anew, not just in metal, but in spirit. The battle wasn't over, but the war inside was won. Hayes watched, amazed. I never thought this was possible. Jack glanced at him. You don't fix things by forcing them back to life. You coax them. You respect their scars. The young engineer nodded slowly, understanding dawning. This was more than mechanics. This was a lesson in patience and pride. As the final rounds fired, the tank's gun roared again and again, each shot more confident than the last. The ground trembled beneath them. Jack's face was stoic, but inside, a fire burned. This machine was not just a relic of war. She was a testament to resilience, to history, to lives, intertwined with steel. Jack walked to the tank's side, placing his hand on the cold steel. You carried more than armor, he whispered. You carried us all. The plaque was unveiled later that day, M115 reforged, call sign, honor, but Jack was already gone, disappearing like a ghost into the early morning mist, leaving behind a legacy stronger than rust. In quiet moments, the tank still hums softly, a heartbeat amid the silence. It reminds those who listen that history isn't just recorded in books. It's lived, breathed, and fought for. Jack's work was more than restoration. It was remembrance, a promise that neither men nor machines truly die. They endure, reborn through honor and fire.